The anti-gun forces in America are exploiting children and exploiting survivors of terrible events, yet again, all in the name of gun control. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, best-selling author, and, most importantly, proud American gun owner. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so and show your support for the Second Amendment. Anti-gun forces on Capitol Hill are calling to testify an 11-year-old girl from Uvalde, Texas, to talk about her terrible experience in the mass shooting down there. Now, this is a typical tactic of the anti-gun movement. And what exactly is that tactic? They like to masquerade their anti-gun agenda behind children who are too young to understand what's going on, in my view, and survivors of these tragedies who, although surviving a terrible tragedy, gives them no particular expertise to speak about how to solve it in the future. We're going to get to that in just a second. Of course, all of this is about taking away your gun rights, even though you and I, as law-abiding gun owners and Second Amendment advocates, have nothing to do when a psychopath or a murderer or terrorist does something stupid or evil with firearms or anything else. We have no control over that. Why are we paying the price with our rights of what these people do? Now, I wanted to start off with the absurdity of the anti-gun forces calling children to testify on Capitol Hill about taking away our rights and their future rights in the name of gun control. Now, I've heard for the last few weeks nothing but arguments along these lines. Nobody who's under the age of 21 should be able to buy a firearm, including an AR-15, because they're not mature enough to handle the responsibility. They're not capable. They're not smart enough. That's what we've heard, right? Well, so all of a sudden now, the anti-gunners are calling an 11-year-old to testify about the Constitution. But how is it possible that we should not let anybody under the age of 21 have a gun, even though, by the way, 18-year-olds are constitutionally allowed to vote under the 26th Amendment, but somehow we are supposed to listen to 11-year-olds talk about anything relevant to the debate about the Second Amendment gun rights and gun control in America. It's just absurd, right? Makes no sense. But I want to talk specifically about a couple other fallacies, logical, that you probably aren't going to hear about this on other channels. And I really want you to understand this. The first logical fallacy that the anti-gunners are using is what I call the expertise of the survivor. Now, in this case, children survived a terrible mass shooting in Texas, just like people have survived plane crashes or they survived cancer. And therefore, because they're survivors of these terrible events that most people luckily don't have to go through, they somehow, in certain people's minds, have the appearance of some extra credibility, as if their views of the situation hold greater weight than other people's views who luckily haven't been able to go through or haven't gone through such a terrible, terrifying experience. And again, mercifully, few of us will go through the experiences, and thank God for that. But with all that said, none of this makes a survivor. Nothing bestows a survivor with some sort of special credibility to speak as an expert on these topics who otherwise they would know very little bit about, right? If you think about this, although this doesn't diminish the ordeal that the student or anybody who's gone through a mass shooting has gone through, it's simply a hard truth. Survival itself doesn't mean you automatically somehow have become a subject matter expert. Surviving cancer doesn't turn you into a medical expert. Surviving a car crash doesn't make you a car safety expert. And surviving a shooting does not make you an expert on gun policy or the Bill of Rights. Sorry, it just doesn't. I'm sorry. But the gun grabbers understand that many people grant the survivors of mass shootings a moral authority to speak. But anti-gun activists know that out of sympathy, many people who would not otherwise consider the view will, of course, listen to what the survivor says, and they won't be challenged on it. I mean, who on earth is going to challenge aggressively a child talking about any topic? But the reality is, although the messenger may be new, the message is, of course, old. It's the same old tried and true anti-gun, anti-American kind of arguments that we've seen over and over again. Second, the anti-gunners are using the ignorance of children to actually hurt children, in my opinion. Exploiting kids as witnesses is wrong in my view. Kids know nothing. What will an 11-year-old possibly know about constitutional rights, how to protect yourself, and the value of the Constitution and guns in protecting lives? By the way, it's interesting that in Texas, ultimately it was a man or men with firearms that ultimately saved her life, because they came into the school and killed the scumbag murder, right? So actually, armed folks ultimately saved her life down there in Texas. But again, I'm not sure that's going to come out in the testimony. I haven't seen it. We'll see what the testimony is. Bear in mind, of course, that students and student activists may want safety. We all want safety. But keep in mind how terrible this is. The anti-gun lobby, in my view, is encouraging these kids to give up a fundamental constitutional right that they've never had. These kids are not old enough at the age of 11 to exercise a constitutional right, such as the right to keep and bear arms. And yet these children are asking adults to take away a right, to take away their future options about how they protect themselves and their family when they become adults. I don't think it's a smart choice, but how is a kid saying that take away our rights to own guns? How is that fair? How do they don't have the cognizance or understanding to make that kind of a choice. And again, as you know, it's far easier to give up something that you don't already have. So if you say to me, Mark, give up playing high-lie or give up playing polo or give up playing, croquet or something, I'm like, hey, yeah, I don't care. I'll play it anyway. It doesn't matter if I give it up. So that's the reality with these children. Children testifying about gun control. By and large, they don't have guns. They're not carrying guns to protect a family. They don't have a family to protect. They're being protected by parents, teachers, society, because they're kids. So they're asking to give up something that they've never experienced and have no need for right now. But that may change dramatically when they turn 18. The third logical fallacy of the anti-gun strategy of using children to advance gun control is they exploit emotions. Now, we know all the way back to the Greek philosophers, including Aristotle, that appeals to emotions are logical fallacies. This is what Aristotle wrote in Greek. The arousing of prejudice, pity, anger, and similar emotions has nothing to do with the essential facts, but is merely a personal appeal to a man who is judging the case. There's a reason that trial juries are instructed by the presiding judge not to allow their emotions to dictate their decisions. Again, the point is that facts and logic should be followed, not emotions. But when it comes to mass shootings and other terrible tragedies involving firearms, the anti-gunners are nothing but appealing to emotions. But even Aristotle explained that appeals to emotions are logical fallacies. But here's the thing. Children of all ages really don't have their own original thoughts. They have their teachers' thoughts, they have their parents' thoughts, they have their peers' thoughts, maybe they have social media thoughts, at least when it comes to public policy and politics. I mean, few people are going to look to an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old or a teenager for original thinking. And keep in mind history. History is very important to this channel, and that's why I try to teach you history. It took thousands of years of trial and error for Western civilization to come up with a reasonably humane system, which I think we have in the United States, for all of us to be able to live peaceably with a fair amount of personal freedom and yet some level of security. That balancing between civil liberties on the one hand and security. And I think we've done a pretty good job in the United States. I'm not saying it's perfect. You can always improve on systems. But overall, when you look at the rest of the world and world history, we've done a pretty great job here in the United States in balancing this interest out. Probably better than anybody else in the history of the world. But beyond that, of course, here you go. You have a bunch of children. That's usually what the anti-gunners do. Remember the Parkland students, the Parkland kids. These are a bunch of people that come out of here. They don't really know much about this issue. They're just appealing to the fact that they suffered through this tragedy. And next thing you know, they're asking to throw overboard, hundreds, if not thousands of years of education about the importance of an armed citizenry. In the end, children talking about gun control is really just a form of appeal to emotion, saying I went through something terrible. It really hurt me emotionally. I'm very sad about it. I'm very unhappy about it. I'm terrified. All these are terrible things. I'm sorry that happened to anybody who's gone through such a thing, but that is not a basis for us to give up all the benefits of an armed society and our right to keep and bear arms at all levels of this country. To wrap up, many people in the gun control movement like to use children as the face of the gun control because they are able to make points like, let's see the world through a new lens. Let's see the world of hope through the eyes of a child, and let's just look for a better world. These are interesting sentiments, I agree, but how realistic are they? Because the reality is, in a world with nobody has guns, but the government is not a new world. Seeing the world anew is actually seeing a world that's quite old, a feudal world where you and I are no longer citizens, we become serfs. A world where the peasantry, that's us, would be disarmed. And the king, that's the government, controls the army and controls all the arms in a society. Now, interestingly, we know that world from the movies. It's called the Hunger Games. Capital City gets the stormtroopers and the rocket systems, and the peasants, that's you and I, we get at best a bow and arrow if we're lucky. Okay, I hope you learned a little bit something here today at the Four Boxes Diner. If you haven't subscribed, please do so, and we'll see you again soon at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.